Okay, it looks like it is recording. So, welcome everyone. If you've attended any of our past presentations, you know I'm usually the one doing the most talking, but today that won't be the case because I'm joined by five current graduate students across the United States. I'm joined by Savannah Cousins, who is pursuing her master's in second language instruction. Courtney Kennedy, who has a wealth of graduate school experience, already holding her master's in Latin American Studies from the University of Texas at Dallas, um, and a PhD in Latin American History and Foreign Policy from the University of Oklahoma. And she is also currently pursuing her master's in Information and Library Masters from the University of Oklahoma as well. Next, we have Kelsey Slater. She is a PhD candidate at Mississippi State University in the Department of Kinesiology and studies sports management. And lastly, I'm joined by Kwang Ho Park, who is from South Korea but is currently pursuing his PhD in the School of Hospitality and Sport and Tourism Management at Troy University. At the end, so what we'll be doing today is they will be talking about their graduate school experiences with the admission process and also why they're their current what they do, you know, in their daily lives as a graduate student. At the end of the panel, we'll be having a Q&A session for all the participants to chime in. So I talked a little bit about everyone, but the first question when I sent out these questions to the panelists is tell us a little bit about yourself, your program, and what made you go to graduate school. So if anyone would like to start off with that, I see Courtney on my screen. So would you mind starting, please?
Okay, so I've been in grad school forever. I didn't anticipate doing this, but that's how it's panned out. I decided to go into grad school because I wanted to be a professor. And now I've decided to change my focus. So I'm going into libraries. So I went from a history background into a library background. But I think they're both complementary. So I think they fit nicely together, my previous life and my current life.
Great. And one thing I really apologize, Stephen, is yes, we also have Stephen Norris, who is pursuing his Master's of Science at Georgia Tech in Global Media and French. So I'm very sorry about that, Stephen. With that said, would you mind us telling, you know, a little bit, I guess going a little bit more about your program as well?
Yeah, and I apologize. I'm connecting by phone today, so I wasn't sure if you knew I was on the call or not, and just checking from that perspective. Yeah, so like Max said, I am studying in the global media program at the Georgia Institute of Technology in Atlanta, with a focus on French language. It is a combination of computer science and foreign language. And my research sort of lies at the intersection of mass technology and popular culture, and where those two fields intersect. I chose to go to start master's study mainly because I wanted to further my my education. I also wanted to sort of be more well-rounded as a professional, possibly expand my career opportunities through extended education. And for many of the advanced career options now, I'm sure other folks on the panel may touch on this, but it seems like just having your bachelor's is not quite enough anymore to be a competitive candidate in a lot of searches. So that is what prompted my decision to study and begin a master's program.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, very good. We're very happy to have you here. I guess would anyone, I guess Kelsey, would you mind telling everyone, a little bit about your program and kind of your background?
Sure. So as you mentioned, I'm a PhD candidate. I'm entering my last hurrah here this summer in my PhD program in sport management. I first went back to graduate school after working a little bit after undergrad. Sports always been a big part of my life. I played Division I volleyball in undergrad, and then I worked in event management for about 5 years. But I really kind of missed the sport side of my life. So I went back and started my master's in sport administration with the idea that I would go into event management on the sports side. But I kind of fell in love with research, and some of the professors that I worked with, they really thought that I could be a scholar in the field. So I decided to pursue my PhD, and I'm really glad that I did. I'm excited to, keep pursuing my research in sport for development, as well as hopefully be a great professor.
Yeah, so very good. That's something I think if you're going to pursue your master's and especially your PhD, is you're going to have to not, I guess, you have to love research. You're going to have to do it. Every program kind of requires a certain research course, and learning how to research is very important as well. And lastly, I'm joined by two my fellow Troy University students, Kwang Ho Bark and Savannah Cousins. Would one of y'all mind, I guess, introducing yourselves?
Oh, yeah, I'll do first. Hello, my name is Kwang Park. I'm from South Korea, and I'm majoring in sport management, and my research interested in virtual reality in the aspect of spectator sports and sports video game. And also, I'm a fourth year doctoral student in PhD program of sport management, which is included in Sorel College of Business at Troy University. And also the reason I went to graduate school is I already had a dream to be a teacher from elementary school. And also in undergraduate school, my mentor, professors affected me to become a professor. And also my undergraduate school is a Korea National Sport University. So where to make some gold medal in competition in internationally. Yeah, that's why I wanted to go to graduate school.
Yeah, great. I'm kind of picking up on a theme here, is a lot of the students who are pursuing their PhDs want to be professors. And I think I also fall in that same boat as well. But I'm currently, just in my master's program. And how about you, Savannah?
Hey, hello, I'm Savannah Cousins. Like Max said, I'm also trying to be a professor. So I'm in my second language instruction program at Troy, and I teach ESL mostly. I wanted to go to graduate school because I taught overseas in China, and I had the ESL background, and I taught at Troy in our ESL program. And Troy offered a second language instruction program. So I thought I should get my master's so I could do this full time. I love traveling and going places, and I love teaching English. I also speak French as well. I know someone else in here said they are majoring in French as their master's. So that's a little bit about me. And I saw someone said my dog is cute, so this is Bowie. And thank you for saying he's cute.
Yeah, we're very good. Glad to have him or her, the dog. Yeah. So I just kind of wanted to ask, a lot of the work we do at Education USA is preparing students to apply for graduate school or their undergrad. So do you have any advice on how you started your research on what graduate school program you wanted to attend? And I guess, Savannah, you can hit on this because you're on my screen.
For graduate school, I looked at my options, but since I was already working at Troy, and I knew friends who did the second language program, I decided to go with Troy. But I'm also currently pursuing a second master's, and I applied for other schools for that, for forensic linguistics. So I applied to Cardiff and Hofstra for those schools, and I just narrowed down my search for schools on places that had what I specifically wanted to do. And I got into both of those schools. So I just really narrowed down my search, what I wanted to do with my life, and really focused in and did a lot of research, a lot of Googling. Google became my friend of just researching these universities that had what I wanted.
Yeah, very, very, very good. Yeah, you definitely, yeah, researching in Google is always a friend. How about you, Courtney?
For my first master's, I met a professor who was starting a new program and she needed students. And so she enticed me by saying, well, there's no GRE requirement. So that was helpful. I do not enjoy the GRE. For my PhD program, I knew several people in the program and I knew a professor in the program. And so it was, my friends liked the program. I thought it was the best bet for me. But for the other programs that I applied to, I did a lot of Googling. I looked at where people who I knew were currently studying. And then I would just reach out to professors and kind of get a feel for who they were and if they were interested in taking on additional grad students. And if they were, then I would apply.
Very good. Yeah. I also had a similar experience about the standardized test. Very good. And how about you, Kelsey?
Yeah, so when I first, for my master's, I really wanted to be at a large university because my undergrad was quite small, and I didn't really, even though it was Division I athletics, it wasn't like big time what you think of as American, big time American football. And because I was looking to study sport management, I wanted to be in that environment. And I also, used the network I had from volleyball to kind of like reach out to people I knew to see if they knew anything about, different universities, different programs. And they often like kind of put me in touch with their faculty athletic rep who would then kind of tell me about specific programs. Also a lot of Googling. I think that's a big part of the search now. And then for my PhD, because I was, actively doing research for my master's thesis at the time, I mainly focused on scholars that I had seen in my current research who were doing things that were similar or things that I might have been interested. So I really didn't reach out to schools directly for my PhD. More, I just went the pure scholar route. I only, emailed people who I was interested in working with on a one-on-one level, because I think the PhD is a little bit more of a individualized relationship. And I found that I think a lot of professors like really love talking about their work. So if you are interested in working with an individual and you have, read their book or read their most recent journal articles and you can talk to them about it, they're going to be interested in that level of kind of care and dedication that you're showing to research.
Yeah, that's really a good point you made, is looking at where those scholars in your field attended, and what research they did. That's really good point. Thank you for that, Kelsey. And how about you, Kwang Ho? As an international student, you might have a different perspective to offer.
Yeah, right. At first, I have not known there are some good schools for sport management in the United States, but I talked a lot about sports management with a professor who belonged to some university placed in the United States. So I got a lot of information from him, and also to learn sports management. The United States is a very appropriate place because the United States have some 4 major sports: NBA, NFL, or NHL, MLB. So anyway, because of that, I decided to go to United States. I keep kept Googling the information, and same as the opinion from Kelsey, I kept contacting with the professors who are matching with my research interest too. That was very helpful to figure out which school is good for me. Yeah.
Very good. I'm starting to kind of pick up a theme about everyone wanting to be professor, Google, and research. Very, 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 very good. And lastly, how about you, Stephen?
Yeah. So I will say, but one of the things that probably differentiates me from the rest of the folks on this panel, my career trajectory is probably not to become a professor. But what draws me back in is I had very similar experiences, and I think Google searching for two things, especially for people who are maybe coming from out of country. If you have pre-identified some geographic locations that you might be interested in, narrow your search to colleges in those places. Do you want to have an urban setting? Do you want to study in a large city? Is there a particular state you might be interested in? Maybe, you'd like to be somewhere like California on the West Coast where there's a lot of beaches. Maybe you prefer a smaller environment and you can find somewhere maybe in the South or Midwest in a rural location that might fit your needs, where you might get a little more one-to-one association with professors at a smaller school. So thinking about the type of collegiate experience you might want to have is maybe a good first route to start narrowing down a search. And then thinking about the research topics that you are most interested in, and finding professors, like a couple of the other folks on the panel have said, that are involved in that research, and reaching out to them at those schools in the areas that you've narrowed down to. And that's essentially what sort of drew me to the program at Georgia Tech. I happen to be interested in looking at the technology of Google Maps. There's a researcher at Georgia Tech who has delved deeply into that topic matter pretty precisely. And so he was someone I was able to connect with, who led me to the global media program, which was a new program, and sort of playing off of what somebody else had said. If you find a new program that is starting up, my program, I was in the first cohort, the first group of students that were admitted into the program. You may find a little bit easier of a pathway into a master's program because they are looking for students to start in the first few years of the program. They want to make sure there's a solid base of people applying to what is a new offering at a school. So that may be a good route to go to.
Yep. Very, very, very good input. Like Stephen said, there is a wide variety of geographical locations, I guess, settings for universities. Stephen, he attends Georgia Tech in Atlanta, a major global city, but, myself and some of the other panelists attend, Troy University, which is a smaller town. So yeah, considering those things as well. Very, very good. And I guess I wanted to ask you, Stephen, did you have any prerequisites that you needed for your graduate school program?
So the GRE was required for my program. I like standardized testing. I thought it was kind of I find it kind of a fun process. So but I know I'm in a probably small minority there, but that aside from the language requirements, I had to interview in French for the program. So that I would say one of the sort of stronger differentiators between undergrad and master's is probably going to be that there will be some interview component likely with a master's program, and that is something to consider.
Mm-hmm. Very, very, very good. And how about you, Kelsey? Did you have to do any prerequisites for your graduate school program?
Sorry. Yeah, the GRE was required for me for both my master's and my PhD. And as well as there was a GPA requirement. I believe it was just a 3.0 But I think they really look at you holistically. And then also when you're coming for your PhD, I think it's a little bit different. It is really about like the individual relationship you're going to have with who is going to be your advisor. And that's, I think, a really big part of it. They want to make sure that like you can handle the rigor of a PhD program, as well as that your like research interests like really fit with your mentor, right? Because it's kind of, I think it's not only do they have to accept you, but like you have to choose them as well. I think that's a really kind of important thing to remember, is that like this is really your choice, because it is about your education. So it's important, I think, to take a lot of ownership in that, for sure.
Yeah, very, yeah, very good. Yeah, just because, you know, the school, I guess, admits you doesn't mean you need to attend. You also need to choose that, you know, that specific school. Yeah, exactly. Very good point. And how about you, Kwang Ho?
Oh yeah. So as they mentioned, the GRE, TOEFL, or matching the research interest with professors is very important. But so yeah, Kazakhstan student, and I'm from South Korea, so we are international student. So we have one more prerequisite, so kind of English, right? So
That's
for
a big one.
for international student, English is very important. So when I came to the United States for master degree, I was not enough for English, so that caused me some kind of have low confidence, and the level of competence is totally closely related to academic performance. So kind of solving questions for GRE TOEFL is different from speaking in English. So before coming to the US, so you have to be familiar with English. And also I started learning English from 29 years old. It's so late, but now I'm talking about in English. I can be familiar with English. So if you want to go to the United States for graduate school, so you are not late. So you are not late. So just to start English as best as you can to be familiar with, and yeah, after that you can prepare graduate school. Then they will make your successful academic life. Yeah.
Yeah, very good. And I'd like to ask, were there any certain tools or websites you used to, I guess, prepare for like the TOEFL or IELTS or whichever English proficiency exam you took?
Yeah.
Yeah. Which exact websites did
For
you use?
for TOEFL or GRE things?
I guess both.
Yeah, actually, yeah, we can get a lot of information about TOEFL and GRE from website, but in South Korea, there were lots of some academy for learning TOEFL and GRE. So I paid the money, kind of about $200, and yeah, to learn how to understand the GRE, TOEFL, and they made me keep yeah solving some questions again and again. And I could be familiar with that questions. I'm not sure other country has that kind of academy, but yeah, for my suggestion is kind of buying a prep book, which is cheapest one, and yeah, solve that questions from prep books again and again. That will be helpful for you guys to understand the types of questions GRE and TOEFL. Yeah.
Yeah, very good. And how about you, Courtney?
As I said, I didn't need the GRE for my first master's. I needed it for my PhD, and I did not need it for my current master's program in library science. But when I did have to study for it, I had to take it 3 times to get the scores that I needed. I was originally going to do another program for my first master's, and then I switched to the program that didn't have the GRE requirement. But when I did study for it, I bought these very large study books. I just Googled online to find practice quizzes. I bought a spiral notebook and wrote down vocabulary words. And I studied for a good, I would say 6 months or so. And I know some people study for a year or longer. So it just depends on you and how well you are with taking tests. But there are plenty of free options, I think, online to study.
Yeah, would you say, I guess someone asked in the chat, that, is the GRE, required for most PhD programs? Do you know anything about that?
I think it's totally dependent on the program and the university. I will say, I think some programs are realizing that it can be a hindrance for some people because it is expensive. And you do have to get a certain score. And so I think some programs are getting rid of GRE requirements.
Yeah, very good. And I've noticed, I guess also since the pandemic started, a lot more the standardized testing is being taken away or being left out of schools' admission requirements because it's harder to take now, harder to a lot of things. And how about you, Savannah? Did you have to take a certain test or certain classes in order to get into your program?
No, but I had to have a writing sample. So I looked at programs that didn't require the GRE because I don't like standardized testing. I feel like I excel in my writing. So I looked for writing samples. It also depended on my GPA. And for my other schools that I applied to for my second master's, I had to have a writing sample, and I also had to do personal statements on how I felt I could contribute to the program, which I enjoy writing, so I was happy to do so. And if I do my PhD, I really want to find one that doesn't require GRE, but it's all in what you want to do. So
Yeah, I'm picking up a lot of themes with the panelists here. Lack of standardized tests, research, Google, things like that. Okay, so the next question I have, and someone asked in the chat already, and a real, I guess a real popular question is, how to find funding for your graduate school program. And I noticed some, if not all of you, were graduate assistants, teaching assistants, research assistants. So I'd like to ask, how did you find, scholarships, these opportunities, and what advice do you have for students looking for some type of funding?
I'll start. So I currently am a graduate research assistant in the library. And before that, I was a graduate teaching assistant in the history department. At least here at OU, the library is the #1 employer of international students on campus for undergrads and graduate students. So you might want to look at wherever you're applying to see if there are openings for graduate assistants on campus. Most of the university websites have their openings. They should have their openings up fairly soon, usually in the spring for the fall semester. So start applying early. You can reach out to different departments to see if they have openings. And I know for international students, you need that assistantship because it's difficult to get funding otherwise. I have a friend from Armenia who could not enter into her opera program unless she had funding, and she luckily got the funding last week. So I know that it's kind of a scramble. So start early and start reaching out and contacting people to see if maybe there are options on campus. So early bird gets the worm, as they say.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very good. And I'd like to ask, were you I guess you said you're a research assistant?
Yes.
Yes. So were you a research assistant for, I guess, even during your, I guess, first semester of your graduate school program? Because a lot of times, it's easier to find the opportunity once you're already on campus. But a lot of students, don't have the resources to pay for that first semester and then hope they get a position.
Right. Yes. I think for the international, so I've been lucky here at OU where I've had funding throughout. So I've never gone without funding. Both of my funding opportunities have kind of overlapped. But I know that for some international students, yes, they do have to arrive on campus, and then it might take a semester or so to find that funding, which is not ideal. So that's why I say try to find that before. If not, you might have to wait a semester or 2 semesters.
Mhm. Yeah. So yeah, very good input. How about you, Savannah?
For me, I was a graduate assistant and I looked online, like she talked about, for openings. I also had some connections at Troy, so I knew people and I just got on it. I emailed people, I called people, and I made those connections to get the funding. And also for other universities, I look on their sites. They have scholarships. Cardiff had a scholarship, and you can also get jobs at places like for Hofstra. When I got in there, they offered me another assistantship to help pay for school because it can be very expensive. So that's what I did. I just tried to make as many connections, emailed people, and looked online.
Mhm. Yeah, very good. Some started to pick up the theme, networking and reaching out. That's probably the most important thing. How about you, Kwang Ho?
Actually, I got scholarship not from the external side or association. I got scholarship from the department. But as you know, the department want to give a scholarship to very competitive students. So it is very important to be competitive from other students. So to be competitive before going to PhD, it is very important for you to have some academic experience, like going to conference or making some article published, or it is very important for you to have some practical experience in your field. For me, I have a lot of experience about related to leisure sports, like becoming a scuba diving instructor or ski patrol and lifeguard. I have a lot of some experiences. So then the faculty can decide, judge, you are very competitive, I want to give you money. So the first, it is very important for you to be competitive in practical and academic field.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very good. And how and Kelsey, I know you were also a doing some type of assistantship as well. Can you expand on that and how you found that opportunity?
Yeah, so when I first started looking at graduate school, I thought I was going to go the route of being a graduate assistant within the athletic department at the schools I applied to, specifically working with volleyball. And I applied to some schools where that was my kind of opportunity, but they weren't schools that I was as drawn to on the academic side or even like the geographic environment side. So they weren't the greatest fit for me. Whereas at Mississippi State, I liked their program. I liked a lot of the faculty. I liked the environment. And I first, in my department, they weren't funding any master's students. So I started to kind of look elsewhere. And I use the internal Mississippi State network. I think Courtney mentioned that they post a lot of the graduate assistants positions, on the network, and it's really attractive to them if you've already been accepted to the school, because that's definitely a good thing. So if you apply early, and I found a position with the communications department, where I was a graduate teaching assistant in their broadcast television lab. I knew how to edit video, so I had that hard skill that not everyone who is in graduate school has. And the communications department, they actually didn't have their own master's program at Mississippi State, so all of their graduate assistants were in other programs. Most of them were broadcast meteorologists, which is a really big fun fact. That's a really big program at Mississippi State. 1/3 of all weather people on television went to Mississippi State. Weird fact. So
I'll write it down.
so I kind of got lucky that I had a skill set that matched what the department was specifically looking for at the right time. So I went that route, which it was very kind of surprising for me. And then for my PhD, I wasn't going to go anywhere that wasn't going to offer me full funding. That was a really like important part for me. So as Kwango kind of mentioned, they want to give funding to students that they're trying to recruit, right? So for the PhD, I think it was people used funding as a tactic to try to get me to come there, like to their university. So being a very competitive applicant, I think really helps in that sense. But again, it's about finding the right fit for you. Because I had other offers, but I really liked the faculty at Mississippi State, and I knew that they were very supportive of my research, and that was really ended up like those relationships were more important to me than maybe even a university that was a little bit more prestigious.
Yeah, and you mentioned being a competitive applicant. Can you kind of expand on what you mean by that?
Yeah, I mean, I think some of it is being really involved in research as a master's student, writing a master's thesis, right? There's a lot of people that I talk to now that are thinking about coming to Mississippi State for their PhD, and they want to talk to a student who's in the program that don't have a master's thesis. And I always say like, that might be a little bit of a challenge for you if you're not really familiar with research, like rigor. As well as, like having a really high GPA, having good letters of recommendation. If you can have scholars in your field and people in who are respected in your field speak really highly of you, that carries a ton of weight. My current advisor, for example, like when he came on his interview at Mississippi State, one of his like recommendations actually for the professor position is somebody who's extremely respected in the sport communication field, which is his field. And that carried a ton of weight with our search committee. Like they saw that name and they're like, oh, he's worked with this professor who is one of the most prolific researchers in the field. He must be a great candidate, right? So if you can have people in your corner who are going to speak for you and on your behalf, that goes a long way.
Yeah, very, 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 very good advice. And lastly, I guess, Stephen, did you have any advice, on how to like find like scholarships and funding for your, graduate school?
Yeah, just from my experience for international students, the scholarship funding is going to be a bit of a challenge. And unfortunately, that's just the reality. But for program funding for assistantships, that is going to be a relatively easy route to go. And one of the things I would suggest is find out who is the program advisor for the program that you are most interested in. Those are the folks who are going to help you find the assistantships that are related to your program. Yeah, very, very, very good. And this kind of leads into, someone asked a good question in the chat. Have your universities seen any budget cuts to graduate school, I guess, funding since COVID? Can anyone kind of talk about that?
I can actually. What's really interesting is a lot of universities got what we call CARES Act funding, which in my department's case, they're using that for some graduate students. There's some graduate students who they thought would have finished their dissertations this coming summer, but we're not able to for a variety of reasons. One, it's access to research participants. When you're using human subjects, it's a lot harder to recruit people to come in during the pandemic. or even have permission to come to do research on human subjects during the pandemic. So they got their funding extended for another year, which meant that they were able to like give their assistantship to another student. So we actually will have, or Mississippi State will have more graduate students in the fall than what we typically have who are funded. But at the same time, there's some, departmental, I guess, funding that might not be there. For example, like we have a lecturer who is retiring and they're not refilling his position, which will put a little bit of extra stress on graduate students and faculty who have to make up those somebody has to still teach those classes. So it's kind of a double-edged sword there. I think in some ways, universities know that like recruiting competitive graduate students is a really good thing for them. But on the other side, they're not like necessarily filling lecturer positions of people who are retiring, or they might be in a hiring freeze for other staff positions, which may make things a little bit more challenging. For example, like sometimes we have we have a couple student workers, or we typically have student workers. Now we have one student worker, which makes things on the administration side of our department a bigger challenge.
Yeah, very, very good. And I also kind of just want to add, I think it depends a lot on the university. Some universities have more funding, like if they're a private school, a public school. I think it depends on the university as well. Does anyone else have anything to add to that?
Oh yeah, there is a very clear way. So when you contact a professor, you just ask, is there any funding opportunity? Then they will give you answer. Yeah, we have a funding. So if you want, you just apply your application to our school, or we don't have a funding, but you can apply. So you can pick which school you can apply. That is a very clear way too.
Most department websites have a list of graduate students currently in the program with their names and their email addresses. So you can just reach out to those graduate students and say, hi, I'm thinking about applying. Can you give me a feel for the program? Ask questions about funding, because some students might get different funding packages even within the same program. So just ask these students what their experiences are like. I get questions all the time from prospective students, and I'm very honest with them because I feel like I have to be honest with them. It's my duty. So yeah, reach out to current graduate students in the program that you want to apply in and see what they say about funding opportunities too.
Okay. Yeah, and someone added in the chat, she added, we talked about the process, I guess, for finding a PhD program, reaching out to these professors. Would you say it works the same way for your master's degree as well? Yeah, so it's pretty much the PhD process and master's process, there's some similarities. So yeah, what I kind of picked up from that question is, just the power of just networking and reaching out. I think every school has on their website, even has like a directory where you can find, certain professors based on like what college they're in and their contact information as well. So very, very good, helpful information, you all. Next, I think we've kind of touched on it, with the selection process for graduate school. But would anyone like to share, what were the least important factors when searching for the best fit graduate school program?
Most would have been funding for me. I got into one of the top programs in Latin American history, but I found out that there was no guaranteed funding. You had to reapply every year. And I knew that created a very toxic environment for the graduate students. So funding was my first, I had to have funding. I was not going to go into debt for this degree. But then a feel for the graduate students in the program, the professor I was working with, I wanted to make sure that he actually cared to work with me. Sometimes you run into problems with with professors, and they're very busy. So you need to make sure that you have someone on your side who's going to help you. So that's just a matter of getting to know them beforehand and getting a feel for who they are as a person.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would definitely say, and just kind of dealing with education is at Kazakhstan and the students here, funding is definitely the most important factor. Would you say there's any other factors, that kind of like correlate with a good graduate school experience that aren't necessarily related to academics?
Yeah, funding is important. And also there is another important thing. Yeah, meeting good professor, good advisor. Yeah, there are different kind of advisor and professors. Some of the professor take care of you as like a family. But some of the professor just to let you very free. You study by yourself, but if we give some outcome, they give us some very good comments. Or some professor, yeah, didn't take care about you much. Or some professor just give you a lot of work, not to work you're studying. So meeting a good professor is very, very important too. So not depending on the level of the name value of a school, meeting professor is very important to decide whether you can finish your graduate PhD degree or not. Yeah.
Yeah, and I guess kind of to piggyback off that, when you say a lot of work, I mean, doesn't mean like some graduate programs won't provide any work. I think it just means kind of just busy work, work that doesn't really do much to, I guess, advance your skills. Yeah, and also I guess kind of what you mentioned, just searching who are the faculty in that program, and just kind of deciding, is that who I want to be with, what they study, things like that. In my case, when I decided on my graduate school program, I reached out to a few, and I just got kind of the warmest response from usually the people at my university compared to other universities, and that was kind of deciding factor in me, and it's kind of helped me, I guess, feel comfortable in my program. Would anyone else like to add anything to that? Oh yeah, and I guess one person in the chat asked something that's related. How did you find the supervisor, professor, in the university, in your program?
I found mine by going to conferences, which I know is not helpful right now.
Yeah.
But yeah, I found both of mine through conferences.
Reading in the
that is
literature.
good.
Sorry, Mac.
Okay, yeah. No. Yeah, sorry. So like, yeah, looking at the literature, like on the journal articles, seeing, where those professors are from. But when you mentioned the conference, a lot of conferences are going on Zoom these days. So it might be easier for an international student to attend one of those conferences. So yeah, that's very good, helpful information that I didn't even think of. Yeah. So if you're in Kazakhstan, seeing if you can join these conferences via Zoom on like an online platform. And also, I guess, can you kind of elaborate on how did you find like certain periodicals, research that you found these professors by?
Yeah, so there's a couple websites where I know that journal articles can sometimes be tough because they restrict access, and I won't rant about the publishing nonsense of academia in that way. But there's some places like ResearchGate, which a lot of people will push out their own work, and you can actually see their articles. So like that, a lot of people upload their own like PDF of what they written in a way so that, you know, people can see their work. So that's a really like valuable website where you can get some, where you can access things for free. But Google Scholar as well is a good place, you know, so if you're, you know, a lot of people mention they're interested in engineering, which I am not going to say I'm an expert in because I'm not, but you can get into Google Scholar, you know, type in, you know, chemical engineering or whatever subfield, you know, chemical engineering, and then maybe whatever subfield you're interested in. And you'll get, and you can search, you know, by recent year, or you can search by, you know, most cited work. And then you can kind of like go down the rabbit hole and see, you know, who they cite a lot, you know, what labs are being cited, where's a lot of the work, you know, coming out of. And that's, I think, a really good way too.
Yeah, so if you have access to the internet, you know, there is a way to connect with professors, your future professors at that university. And I would like to mention, you know, she mentioned like Google Scholar, you know, it could be a little confusing at first to search, but I think it'll help you in the long run, because as a graduate student, you're going to have to do some type of aspect of research in your program. There's going to be some type of research class, something to do. Yep. And this right here is kind of just a general question, you know, of anything that we didn't really talk about. You know, what advice do you have for prospective graduate student applicants? You know, it could be academics during the application process, or just when they're enrolled in the program, finding a job afterwards, anything like that. Do you have any advice?
I would say if you are rejected from the program of your dreams, it's not the end of the world, and it's not a reflection of you as a person. I did not get into my dream program, and I'm fine today. It's something that helped me grow as a person. So it didn't mean that I was a terrible student, or that I am not going to be successful in the future. So just keep on going.
Yes, very good. Yes, so keep your head up. You're not I guess the saying is, you're not rejected, you're redirected. Yeah, very good. Would anyone else like to add anything? Any advice they can think of for future graduate students?
I would say stay open-minded. As that kind of like, I think, goes off like being rejected. Even if you don't like get into your number one choice, or you may end up at a school that you didn't anticipate ending up in. I mean, if you would have asked me, you know, 7 years ago, if I was going to live in Starkville, Mississippi, which is a very rural environment, I would have said, absolutely not. No way. Like I probably didn't think I was going to be going for my PhD back then either, and here I am. But I actually really love it. It's a great town. The people are really great. So I think a lot of people think that they need to be in New York City or LA, but there's so much amazing like pockets of the US, and so many great schools that a lot of people don't necessarily hear about. And you can, you know, do a lot of great work wherever you are.
Yeah, very, very good advice. I'm not exactly what the number, I mean, there's tons of universities in the United States, and they all of them offer something different, something unique. Yeah, very good. You know, Savannah, Kwang Ho, Stephen, do you have any advice you'd like to add?
Yeah. Actually, I met several graduate students who really want to find the easiest way, solve a problem, solve some questions. And they asked me, do you have any paper you wrote before for some course? And some of the students just copy some paper from internet. But you are a graduate. If you want to graduate student, you should enjoy the pain of studying. If you try to find some easiest way to solve a problem, you are unqualified as a graduate student. So you have to change your attitude, and also you have to change your perspective So in undergraduate student, when we are undergraduate student, we just putting information into our brain. That's all. But so graduate student is kind of making professional information. Kind of we have to change our perspective, like scientific research perspective, like ontological perspective, epistemological perspective, methodological perspective, like that. So I want to explain about this more, but yeah, we have to change the perspective different from undergraduate student. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And also something I'd like to add is, you mentioned copying other people's, I guess, research, and that's a big no-no for not just master's, PhD students, but during your undergrad. That can get you kicked out of the university if you don't cite it properly. So that's something you definitely need to familiarize with, because you'll be doing a lot of research, looking at other people's research in your graduate school program. So knowing how to properly cite things, so you don't get caught, don't get in trouble for plagiarism. Yeah.
Can I bounce off that really quick?
Yeah, sure.
So I work in the library, and I will be a librarian fairly soon. So take advantage of the library and the library. So each subject has a librarian. So get to know that librarian, form some kind of academic friendship with them, so that if you need research help, they already know you. I think that's very important, so that you can have access to those resources when you're writing your thesis or your dissertation or any kind of paper. And this kind of goes along with the citation. There's, a writing center on campus, usually on every single college campus. So take advantage of the writing center. They can help you learn how to cite your sources and all of that, so you don't commit plagiarism, because that will get you kicked out of school. So be careful with that.
Yeah, you mentioned kind of just like these student services. There are, I wouldn't say all, but the majority of U.S. universities have a lot of student services they offer to students. So taking advantage of those resources. If it's the library, usually the library, they also have, I guess the online library, where they have access to all these databases to do research from. If career services helping you find a job after you graduate, writing center, all these different aspects, that would be very, very, very useful. And I recommend, everyone taking advantage of those while they're in school. Next, I guess that kind of answers, kind of what one of the questions is, what kind of resources grad programs offer their students. Does anyone have any input on, like, what specific resources your graduate program offered you or helped you with? Yeah, I know we kind of talked about that.
Depending on the program, there might be travel funding available. When I first entered into my doctoral program, I was assured that I would get a certain amount every year for conference travels, as long as I presented at these conferences. Then there were some budget cuts, and that funding went away. So things can change without you ever knowing what's going to happen, because it can be very costly to present at conferences, to go and to present at conferences, which is another positive of these virtual conferences right now. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. And that's a positive for, like, international students too. Also, they can join those conferences, and it would look better, even on your CV when you're applying for a graduate school program. I would mention, in my opinion, or not in my situation, I've noticed you get a lot closer to your graduate school professors than you would during your undergrad. So there's a lot more, it's a lot easier for them to, for you to help, do research together, things of that nature. I guess, and also I like that. Oh, go ahead.
Oh yeah, I have one more answer. So there are several resources, invisible resources like funding or office or laptop that your department offer, but there are invisible resources like, seeing what your faculty is doing is a very good resource. I sometimes attend the class my faculty is teaching students, it is a very good resource. I can learn how they can teach their students. Also, how the faculty lead their students to successful kind of. We have some event management, Troy University event management department. So they really give some course where students can establishing event. So I learned from faculty how they are doing for the development of students. So it can be kind of invisible resources from graduate school. Yeah.
Yeah, very, very, very good point. And that kind of reminded me, I know in my specific graduate program, it's a lot easier to get connected with your classmates because there's less of us and we're all kind of, have to take the same classes. Like even like a group of us or the students in the program we have our own Facebook page where we can, talk about classes, study materials, and things like that. Did anyone else have that other experience, similar experience?
Yeah, I have a Facebook group for my former department where we can talk about whatever we need to talk about or vent about something going on in the department. I think it's healthy to have that group of people who are going through the same experience as you so that if you have a question, you know that you can go to someone else and then maybe as a group you can go address that question to a professor or the chair of the department. Just having that cohort is very helpful.
Yeah. So that's something you may want to look at when you're doing your graduate school search process. Is what's the faculty to student ratio? If it's a smaller university, if it's smaller, it's going to be a lot more easier to make these connections with other classmates and teachers, professors. Yeah. Very good. And I guess, a lot of students here are just completing their undergraduate degree. How would you say, your graduate school learning experience differentiated from your undergrad one? And I guess is
I can share
Steven,
here.
Savannah.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
I think the primary difference between your undergrad experience and your graduate experience is going to be that you are going to be asked to be pushed to be more analytical, to expand your critical thinking. So it's going to be more writing, more project-based work, and really, I think the sort of general idea is that you are supposed to push yourself beyond just basic memorization, and coming up with your own ideas and how they incorporate into the world of other people's ideas, especially in academia. So I think that is one of the primary differences, is that expect more reading and expect more writing, which has already sort of been discussed. I think a little bit beyond that is that you become a little bit more entrepreneurial, if you will, creating your own ideas, and I've found that has been one of the things that really sets the two worlds of undergraduate and graduate apart, and that you'll largely be expected to do a lot of this on your own time. I think when you're an undergrad, your professors do a good job of keeping you to task. That may not necessarily be the case in a graduate program, but with the added reading and the added writing, you'll be expected to keep all of that up on your own.
Yeah, does anyone else, like Savannah, do you have anything else to add to how your master's program and how it's different?
Yeah, I would definitely say it's more individualized, a lot more writing. I have a ton more writing and I feel like I'm more focused on what I want to do. In undergraduate, you have all these courses that you have to take that aren't specific to what you want to do. So right now I'm just constantly reading about teaching and writing about it and practicing it and using a practical perspective, and also putting in my input. So my own research on my program. So how can I teach well, and really focusing on that rather than it being all summed up by one teacher. I'm really doing a lot of the work myself, and having like a scaffolding with another teacher, but also really doing a lot of it myself.
Yeah, so yeah, I think, graduate school is a lot more specific, but you also have more freedom to kind of focus on what you want. Yeah, very, very, very good, Savannah. And lastly, I mean, does anyone else have any other thing, any other topics, how their undergrad and graduate school experience, they were different?
Yeah, when I was in undergraduate school, we tried to put professional information into our brain, and we memorized that, and we took test. That's all. But yeah, as a graduate student, we are kind of professional to make professional information that we usually see from the textbook. So for that, we have to support our opinion using professional information like from academic journal, and we have to know kind of skill or tool to measure what we intended to know. So it's kind of very, very professional things. So yeah, it's totally different to kind of learner, and for undergraduate student is they are learner, but we are professional. Yeah, that's the what I think. Yeah.
That's a really good point. So start
Yeah, so I
thinking
mean, I think it.
as
Oh,
a
sorry.
as an academic. You're not just a student, you're an academic. And I think that
Mhm.
that distinction is important. So that was a really good point that you made.
Yeah, I mean, I mean, I really like that point. Treat it like it's your job. I mean, it is. Yeah. And the last question I'm going to ask before we have our Q&A session is, did you feel like prepared when you applied to graduate school? If so, what helped you prepare? If not, what do you wish you would have done differently during that process? As a loaded question.
I will say I thought.
Or I guess.
I'm sorry.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
Sort of to mention about it's sort of, I think this sort of plays off of the idea that was so well put about school becomes your job as a master's program. I was a little surprised at the lack of the sort of lack of handholding that you got as an undergrad, that you were largely just expected to figure things out on your own. And I think one of the things that really separated the folks who have felt like they had an easy time in the program that I'm in, and the ones that have had a little bit more difficult journey, are the ones who decide to take things into their own hands. When you need a committee and you have to put that together, that you feel comfortable reaching out to those folks directly, whether it's a professor that you've never spoken to before, or someone in a different part of the university possibly that is outside of your program. In undergrad, I think professors are a little bit more accommodating when you're nervous about, reaching out to get the things that you need done. But for a master's program, you'll find it very difficult to
to complete those things. So I wish I would have sort of mentally prepared for that ahead of time, that I'm going to need to reach out to a variety of folks that I have never talked to before to really be successful, to get the things I need to do done.
Yeah. Something I noticed during graduate school, there's going to be a lot more of your non-traditional student, compared to undergrad. So, professors are going to be more accommodating because students usually have, they have a career, they have another job, they have a family. So students may be more accommodating and helpful in those aspects. And I guess to start the Q&A question, a lot of people have asked about the pandemic and how it affected the I guess the graduate school college experience. Has remote learning, like, or is there would you like to attest to, is any of your schools doing like remote learning? Are they planning to go back on, in person? Are they doing like hybrid? Would anyone like to talk about that?
So we've been on a pretty like hybrid schedule for the last year, but they're going back in person for the summer and the fall primarily. I've actually loved it being like at home because I can just write a ton. I feel a lot less like distracted. So like that's been a positive. And I think it's a little different for me in my PhD because I'm not taking classes right now. I'm just working on my dissertation. So I think it's probably a little tougher for some of our master's students, although a lot of the graduate classes have been in person because it's a small group and it's a cohort. So they really only interact with each other. So they've been in person most of their courses. I think one or two have been online. So the pandemic's challenging. It's tough because people aren't seeing their families and things like that from like a social aspect. But from an academic standpoint, I've actually kind of loved it, which I think is not something a lot of people hear or say.
And also the COVID-19 didn't much affect my studying, because Troy University has a very good online programs. They already have prepared the online programs from 1980 years. So yeah, there was no difficulty to study, but the students who are taking online course, kind of an online course is hard. It is very hard, difficult for them to focus on the online teaching. So they sometimes turn off the camera, they doing something different, and it is very difficult for them to focus on the online course compared to face-to-face classes. So it is very important for you guys to focus on that online teaching class by yourself. Yeah, keep encouraging yourself to focus on that. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. It's a lot. It takes more. What's the word? It is harder to focus on online classes and do your work because you're not really receiving that face-to-face instruction. Which also, that's something maybe you want to look at your university is, are they planning to, what are they planning to do, in the fall, whenever you plan to enroll. And also, if it's online, if it offers, the classes are like asynchronous or synchronous, time where it's like over Zoom, or if it's something like where the professor just posts something, a video or something on the Canvas, the platform you use, and then you go and watch it later and do the assignment.
Mac, I was gonna add something here. Just a couple of things. One thing I noticed is that, when classes move to online, a lot of times, especially in master's programs, class. So, you know, it may not be that it's easier, it may be different. And in some cases, it may actually, I had some classes that I felt like were a little bit tougher because the expectations were different, and maybe readings and writings were increased from what an in-person would look like. The other thing I was going to add is, on top of it, if you're thinking about starting a program in the next few months, looking at the requirements that some schools may have for vaccination, because a lot of schools right now, I know a large conversation happening in the US is that some schools are requiring students be COVID vaccinated in order to even set foot on campus. So other schools are not, and there is sort of a there's sort of an interesting thing to look at in the US with public schools versus private schools. I would imagine a lot more public schools are going to be opening back up, whereas opposed to private schools may keep things a little bit more hybrid based on what they feel works best for their community. The same thing with vaccinations, that public schools will maybe less likely to require a vaccination, where private schools may be more likely to require that.
Yeah, I mean, it's my, I guess, kind of feeling that, things are getting as close to normal as they have been in the past, year or so since it started. Things are starting to open up a lot more with colleges. I know my university plans on opening up and going pretty much as close to normal as possible. So that's definitely something, I would check out, during your research process is, what the university's action plan, what the university's, I guess, COVID plan is. With that said, I see some other questions in the chat. I mean, if anyone wants to talk about, someone asked, if there's a scholarship for online master degree courses. Does anyone know about anything about that?
Georgia Tech has several online master's programs, and it is pretty rare to get funding for those. Generally, a lot of those, a lot of the people applying to those programs in the US are working professionals who can have a master's paid for by the company they work for. So online programs generally do not offer scholarships or even like program assistantships, at least for the institution where I'm at.
Yes. Yeah. And does the tuition for online and for in-person, is it different at y'all's universities?
I have an online fee that I have to pay.
Mm-hmm.
So that is something to consider.
Yeah, there's fees for us as well. It's per credit. I think if you're full-time and you take like one online class, they don't charge you the fee, but when it's completely online, there's fees. So it definitely depends, and it's something to look into because they can really add up.
Yeah, online is more expensive here at Troy than it is in person. So that is something to keep in mind to what you're going to do.
Yeah, and talking about the fees, is that's a lot of they're like almost kind of hidden, is like where they just little bitty things, it could be like if you have a taking like a lab fee, or just like little bitty things, they just add up. And I'd also know for my position, like a graduate assistant position, it doesn't cover those fees. It'll just cover like the tuition cost. And that's something I would, highly encourage you to kind of look at, because you're expecting like your graduate school or the graduate assistantship to cover everything. That's not necessarily the case. There might be those fees that it doesn't cover, something like that as well. And do any of y'all have similar experiences?
Yes, I did not know that my fees were not covered until I got here, and I had a bill. And it's always a point of contention with graduate students here, but it's not the university's fault. It's because I go to a public university, it's the state's rules that dictate what can be covered and what cannot be covered. So again, it's complicated. So this is another question to ask when you're applying. Do I have to pay fees if my tuition is covered with an assistantship?
Yeah. And also, what does your the graduate assistantship, I guess, provide? For example, mine says, it provides like $2,500 a semester, which is roughly 2 classes. But it would be easier financially if they just gave me the 2,500 rather than applying it towards the 2 classes. So kind of asking these questions, and just because I think if the better prepared you are for going into your graduate school program, the better experience you're going to have. Because financial, I see a lot in the international student office here, financial issues are most common, and that's the reason most students end up going back home or having a poor experience while they're studying in the United States. And someone also asked, and it might be a good question for the people next week, where I have international student international student office staff members come in. But this person asked, if they're applying, it might be in Kwang Ho, since you're international, you might be able to attest to it. But if you are applying for a, I guess, immigrant visa in the summer, should you, I guess, apply for the university at that time, or wait until, I guess, wait to apply under like a F1 or J1 student visa? Would anyone like to I can answer that? If not, I can note it, and then I can ask the people next week who will have a lot better idea about it. No? Yeah. And something I like to add as well is, I guess, Kwang Ho, since you are an international student, have you noticed a difference between is it easier to get funding as an international student, or do you think there's more domestic opportunities like scholarships available? Because I think that's also what this person was asking as well.
Yeah, for international students, it is very difficult to get funding. Yeah, that's why I think I'm very lucky. Yeah. So anyway, as I mentioned before, the having academic research results, like publishing your article, or going to conference and presenting some your abstract, and having some lots of practical experience is very important. So for undergraduate students, maybe it is very difficult for them to get academic experience, but it is easy for them to get practical experiences. So whenever you have a time like winter vacation, summer vacation, try to be involved in the field of your field. So if your major is criminal justice, you try to find some have some internship or volunteer related to your field. So for me, when I was in undergraduate school, whenever I have winter vacation, summer vacation, I went to some sports field, like becoming scuba diving instructor, and becoming a ski patrol, or becoming a life guard, and try to get some instruction certification that I learned. So actually, those kind of experience, I think those kind of experience would not be helpful. But now, because of those experience, I got some class, teaching students class, kind of a leader in society. So the being involved in your field is very important. So, and you don't know how that your experience will help for your future careers. So try to your best to be involved in your field before going to graduate school. That will be helpful. Yeah.
Yeah, and being involved in your field and making those connections can help you in the future. You know, as we talked about, those recommendation letters are very important for going to graduate school. Also, for international students, you know, I'd like to recommend is every university or most universities have an international admissions office and recruiters and like admission counselors specifically for international students. So reaching out to them specifically rather than maybe a domestic recruiter may be more helpful. Those people could help you find more financial resources, help you with the application process, answer your, you know, your visa questions, and other information like that. Does anyone else have any other questions? I guess from the audience, or do any of the panelists have anything else they would like to add? Any other information? All right. So, I mean, I'd like to thank everyone for joining. This was really a useful, I mean, great experience for me and the other Education USA, the all the audience members. Y'all had a lot of great information and advice to add, and I was so happy that we could have, you know, all five of y'all, because y'all had a very good background, very, very, very unique. And next week, you know, we will be having a similar panel, but we'll be having a two staff members from the Center for International Programs at Troy University, and they can help you answer more of those visa, really specific immigration application questions. All right, so I hope everyone, you know, the people in America have a good day, and I guess the ones in Kazakhstan have a good night. Take care, everyone.
Thank you, Mac.
Yep. Have a good day.